Hello, gorgeous seekers, and welcome to Moon Magic for the Virgo full moon on March 9th, 2020. This is a truth bringer moon. I think the moon is always a conduit of truth, of checking in with our innate rhythms, of the cyclicality of our existence rather than the linear narrative. The moon always reminds us that things are cyclical, that things work in circles, that it's not about getting somewhere. It's about being in the cycle, right? So the moon always brings us that truth time and again, no matter where it is in a month. But sometimes we get a full moon or a new moon that is very crystallized. The energy is crystallized and it is impactful and it wants you to see something for what it truly is. It's interesting that message came out of me as I'm talking about it, because the big thing with this moon is that we have the moon at 19 degrees of Virgo, we have the sun at 19 degrees of Pisces, and we have Neptune at 18 degrees of Pisces as well. So the sun and moon are nearly conjunct, or the sun and Neptune are nearly conjunct, and Neptune is opposing this full moon. And that's the big message I want to get here. Neptune is opposing the full moon. And Virgo energy is very associated with the goddess, with goddess energy, with the cyclicality of being in the earth, of the wisdom that comes from our earthiness and our embodiment. It's a really powerful energy. Now, opposing Neptune in Pisces. Neptune in Pisces is very much about the fantasy. It's about floating into fantasies, but the shadow side of that Neptunian quality is that we can be taken into places of fear, into places of shadow, into narratives that feel really scary and discombobulated, right? So whenever you have a full moon, we're already full of emotive brightness, and you have it opposing Neptune. There is a sorting out going on here between what is really true and what we fear, the narratives that feel true, the narratives that feel as though they have to keep us and hold us for our whole lives. Now, the first thing to kind of consider when you step into this full moon is think about the 6-month cycle since the Virgo new moon that happened 6 months ago. And the reason I say this is our last full moon before we get into Aries season. We are closing out a chapter with the energy of this Western astrological year in many ways. Pisces is our final energy. And we also have some really big transitions happening in March, including Saturn moving into Aquarius from being in Capricorn for over 2 years. And that these shifts that are coming up a couple of weeks after this full moon are heralding in new logic systems, new ways of moving through our lives. And so this is an incredibly important culminating moon. So the first thing came up was, look at how things have culminated for you up until this really big point. The other reason I say that is Mercury is stationing direct on the same day and time as this full moon. And the symbolism there is really valuable because the full moon is in Virgo. Virgo is also ruled by Mercury. So this is all about self-value, self-worth, and the way we use our mercurial minds to create narrative. So there's this culmination point here of just looking and giving ourselves the credit for how we've grown, how we've changed, how we've morphed in 6 months, even over the last year. If you want to look back at last year's Mercury retrograde in Pisces, which we had in March, you can see how there has been a complete evolution, right? There has been a spin through the seasons. So yes, there's a culminating energy here, but here's the other thing. I don't want you to be looking back over your shoulder too much during this full moon. It's very tempting to kind of with that Neptunian influence, with the fact that the stationing of the retrograde, Mercury retrograde is happening here, it's very tempting and very seductive to go back over and over and over something that's been lost, something that you wish you'd done differently, or something from the past. There can be a lot of nostalgic energy that comes up. There can also be a feeling like you have to repeat something over and over again if you let that Neptunian pull take you with it. However, I want you to focus on the visionary aspect of this moon, which is a primer for all the energetic shift that we are going through this month. And this is a really important point to own. Own where you want to take these next 3 years. And I mean, I am not an advocate of a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan or even a 6-month plan, because if you get too caught up in that planning and that organizing, you resist your own organic structural flow. However, what I mean by this is opening your heart, opening your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit, your analytical mind to what you're tapping into next. And not cutting yourself off at the knees, because one of the big things with this truth-bringing moon in Virgo, if you've ever hung out with any Virgos in life, I happen to be a Virgo moon, Virgos want to get to the truth. They want to say it like it is. They're often finding truth and information to bring to the table. This moon is very truthful, and what it's going to say is it's going to say, where are you self-sabotaging? And I don't think self-sabotage always looks like, I think when you hear that phrase, you kind of think of somebody who's like getting wasted and like drunk texting, or, you know, not paying a bill on time, or actively showing up at the job and, you know, ripping up papers and throwing them on the floor and seeing what happens. I think that phrase can sometimes bring up those really dramatic images. But we self-sabotage in other ways by maintaining commitments or obligations that we know don't really serve us, but in keeping them, it means that we can opt out of growing. It means we can opt out of actually addressing what it is we want to pursue, whether that's more education, whether that's deeper connections, or whether that's a change in career. We can self-sabotage by playing small, not fully committing to something, kind of half doing it and then are putting our foot back. This moon's going to illuminate anything like that. Any of those little parts of yourself that you notice you haven't fully let yourself commit to who you're going to be next. And once again, I don't want you to focus too much on the self-sabotage. I just want to give you permission here to see how maybe in holding on to an obligation or a pattern or a habit, anything that even on the surface is very seemingly positive, you know, can even be considered productive or supportive on a basic level, right? If it feels like something that you have outgrown, but you keep doing it because it looks good on paper and it allows you to avoid your greater destiny, this moon's gonna illuminate it like no other. It's also going to illuminate where you need to commit fully. And we often stop ourselves short here, because we think that to commit fully to something, we need to make it our career. It needs to be a 6-figure career for us to commit to something. And if we're not doing it, then maybe it's just a hobby, or maybe we're just kidding ourselves. I don't think the goal is always to be like the titan of whatever it is that you are doing in life. That is a very false narrative approach. It's not always about these big, bold growths. But let's just say you have a desire to dance, or to draw, or to do some self-development courses, or to be more consistent in your relationships in just having those check-in conversations. And you keep kind of saying, yeah, I kind of do it, but you're never really committing to it. You know, just committing to sitting down and drawing for 30 minutes every day or every other day. And instead of coming up with excuses for why you can't, just choosing, you know, really putting your heart and opening your heart to letting yourself fully explore whatever it is that you need to explore. We cut ourselves off all the time because we are afraid that if we show up, if we put that heart investment into it, if we let ourselves be open to the bigness of that, it will destroy us. We are afraid that that destruction is going to come as soon as we let ourselves be open. That's something that gets trained into us culturally. It's a cultural belief system that has really taken hold over a long period of time. These things develop. And this moon is just going to highlight that. It's going to give you a chance to see it with greater illumination and clarity. So this conversation going on between Sun and Neptune over here in Pisces and Virgo over here, and Moon over here in Virgo is really interesting. Neptune, like I said, can pull you into those false narratives sometimes especially if it's opposing this Moon. It can pull you into those fear stories about how if you open up, maybe it will destroy you. Maybe it will take you down. It can get a little like foggy in House of Mirrors when we have an opposition like this. On the flip side, this moon and the way it's getting activated with this opposition is saying you've got to have more faith, and you've got to choose that faith in yourself. That's the first commitment. And yeah, it's scary, right? It's scary to fully put your energetic bank account behind your faith in yourself, but you got to do it. And that's what this moon is going to be telling you over and over and over again. The other thing that is happening here, it's kind of in its own conversation, but Venus and Uranus are nearly conjunct over in Taurus. And I think that's really interesting because you can think about Venus, this planet that really wants us to tap into what we love, what we value, what we cherish, how we love ourselves. I think Venus is definitely tied to our self-love, our self-worth, our self-value. She's here hanging out with Uranus, the electrifier, the innovator, the one that wants to set things in motion. It's kind of like set those dominoes rolling. That's what Uranus wants to do. They're activating something here and you committing more fully to that self-worth, that self-value, and this vision that I'm talking about for the next few years. You got to choose it. And this is the time right around now, right around this moon cycle closing out. And as we move towards Aries season, this is the time. This is the window of opportunity where you get to choose again and again and again. Well, one final thing too. This moon is trining Jupiter, and I really love that. Jupiter is at 21 degrees of Capricorn right now during this moon, and the moon's over in Virgo. So these two earth signs, right? The moon and Jupiter hanging out in earth signs. This is a very earth and water moon, but that is also guiding us forward. Emotively, what lights you up? Give yourself permission to go there. Give yourself permission to fully open up to it, right? That's fun. That's exciting. That's positive. That's good. It also means you got to choose faith. So all these placements are actually quite supportive. There isn't drama here, but there is clarity, and there is a consistent messaging going on here that's kind of got a no BS attitude about it. 8 of Cups. So good. I'm going to pull 3 more. We'll talk through these energies. 8 of Cups is one of my favorite cards. Remember, for a phase there a few years ago, it was a card that intrigued me but also overwhelmed me. That idea of adventuring and using your faith within yourself and within knowing what is good for you to go into the unseen, to the unknown, rather than sticking with what others have said is good for you, what maybe your past version of self has said was good for you, what's already familiar. The 8 of Cups is bittersweet because we have to pursue what is unfamiliar. We have to embrace the change in shape that we experience. Empress. That is so that Venus and Uranus conjunction over in Taurus. Big conjunction there. I love that. There is bittersweetness in looking down at your body and in your life and it being different and you having changed shape and you having to keep choosing. 8 of Swords, the unfamiliar. And I think the familiar often comes in familiar self-sabotaging thoughts. That's cozy and comfortable. It's kind of like a weighted blanket. Initially maybe that feels okay, but eventually you're going to want to get out from that weighted blanket. You can't live your whole life, pressed down. 9 of Cups. Okay. It's kind of this truth and illusion conversation going on here with these cards. So yeah, 8. 8 is a number of transformation. It is a very powerful energy. And there is just this kind of sense that, yeah, things aren't going to be the way that they were. They're just not, And like I said, this can happen when really good things are happening as well. When we say yes to those things we really want, there's still bittersweetness because you can't go back to the way things have always been done, like maybe you would have done in the past, right? And you have to leave behind all that is familiar, all that is certain, and go into the fog. Now, here's the thing. Empress is here saying, like, yes, this is where we need to be going. The only way to feel that sense of ease, that sense of love, that sense of creativity, that sense of nurturing is to choose this unfamiliar path. This is where I'm hanging out. I'm waiting for you here to hold you and embrace you. And it's kind of like you got to break that seal. The thing that's scariest is the waiting before you move, right? The waiting before you take that action, the waiting before you commit mentally, emotionally, or even practically to something. All that waiting and indecision and going in your head is what's really scary. It's like, and it just starts to seem like, well, once I send that email, or once I make that statement, or once I send off that application, it's just going to be this world of terror. That's the lie. That's the illusion. That's the illusionary aspect of Neptune. That is the shadow side. But the reality is that once that shift happens, what does it feel like? It feels like you aren't abandoning yourself. It feels like you are choosing yourself and you're self-parenting by making those choices. It feels like because you're self-parenting and because you're not abandoning yourself, you are able to make really good decisions for yourself time and time again in the smallest of details and in the biggest of macro lenses. And that's the thing. This moon is about self-trust. This moon is about self-acknowledgement. Stop trying to minimize and make small where situations feel heavy, feel constricting, feel depressing. Stop trying to make small what you really want to be creating in life and saying, oh, well, that's just like, I'm not really going to ever be able to do that. Stop making yourself small by saying, the only way for me to do something is to do it in this way that has to do with like growing a giant business or being like out in the world. I think we can self-sabotage by also feeling like we can only do it one way. Don't make yourself small by putting yourself into any of those boxes. You can want some of the simplest things in life. You may not be after, stardom and a gigantic bank account. You might just be after some greater health and some greater ease where you feel you can wake up in the morning feeling okay with yourself. Don't belittle that and say, oh, that's all I want. That's huge to commit to. That's huge to step into. And this moon is just going to take nothing less than you choosing that. I'm going to get emotional about it because I can just feel the rise in energy here. So we have 2 8s followed up by 2 cards of deep, profound wellness. And that's the thing. It requires these uncomfortable 8s that put us into unfamiliar, put us into the unknown, put us into choosing time and again to move forward in the ways we know are right for us. That is just the way that this moon is working. I'm writing this with you all. And some words of wisdom just as far as like how to sit with this full moon. The Mercury stationing direct, I think Mercury, when it stations, it's a bit of a sensitive time. Along with the full moon, there's a lot rising up. It's kind of like these huge waves rolling through the landscape, right? So you kind of just want to let all those big emotions work through you, notice, witness them, write notes if you want, create art if you want, talk with friends, trusted loved ones if you want, do all of that, that's great. You may not be able to get the full message until a few days after this moon, till we've kind of eased a few days out. Then you maybe kind of be able to put the pieces together and, have more of that game plan or that vision that you want to put forward. So kind of keep that in mind. There's a lot going on in a single day, and we need to honor that. We need to honor ourselves within that. I'm going to advocate again and again, we are in a culture that wants linear progression, wants expanded out, wants growth, 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 consume, 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 and we are taught to belittle harder emotions, more difficult emotions, heavier feelings, and to belittle the desires that involve just simplicity and kindness and warmth. And this moon is helping us to remember how important all those deeper yearnings are. So I am sending you guys so much love. I'm doing some healing with myself this month. I've got a lot shifting in my personal life at the moment. It's all great, but it's a lot of work for me. So I'm keeping my calendar kind of quiet in March. However, I will be opening up more sessions. I will keep you posted on Instagram. You can keep an eye on my calendar, but you can also keep an eye on here, Instagram, also Patreon. I'm doing an amazing 4-week program over there for the Mercury retrogrades, and I would love to see you join me. We're also going to be talking Uranus and Saturn, or Saturn in Aquarius. I'm getting all my signs mixed up here. Saturn in Aquarius, which is happening this month in March. We're also going to do a new year with the Aries beginnings, and of course a full moon activation where we will go deep and we will pull some cards and we will do some rituals when it comes to the full moon. So if you want any of those extras, you can join me on Patreon. I would love to see you over there, and I will give you my link for my website and for finding me on Instagram. I would love to see you in any of those places. You can also find PinkLune's gorgeous jewelry and crowns that she hand makes on her Etsy shop. I will leave her link below so you can go check out what beautiful things she has in store for you. I will see you all very soon for the next moon magic, a new moon in Aries. Very scintillating, and I will see you all very soon.